So today I'm taking on a fun project. We're picking up an old metal mini here. This is a Sanguinary Priest, a Blood Angel Space Marine for Warhammer 40k. Again, this is an older metal miniature. This has been since updated, but I'm going to hold one of these. We're going to start off by coating this all down with flat green from Vallejo model color. Then we'll move on to burnt red, bold purple red, and use a little bit of spring green here to actually bring in our colors. Blood Angel Apothecaries are going to come in a variety of colors, mostly red and white, with a bit of gold and a couple of other little accent colors here and there. So let's take a look. So the first thing I'm going to do is use my airbrush to apply some of this Vallejo flat green to the entire mini in mostly the areas that are going to be red. Red and green are complementaries, they're direct complementaries, and therefore I'm using this as a shadow tone. So I'm using a darker green over a black primer, and this will give us a nice saturated shadow, as well as give us a nice creamy blend to that darker area as well. This is just a property of using complementaries. Later on, I'll show you the opposite when using it for a highlight. But for now, this is what we're doing. Next, we're getting out some of that burnt red that we pulled out earlier, and we're going to mix that down with a bit of our flow improver, like I do most of my paints, and we're going to apply that thinly over the green until we get a nice rich color. Now this is going to be mostly from a top down and from a side angle. We're going to leave mostly some of the kind of under areas kind of greener, or at least a little bit darker. So just keep that in mind as you apply this. Keep the most paint application towards the light. You'll notice I'm doing most of this airbrushing in real time. I'm not speeding this up for this video, since this portion is actually pretty quick in real life. I'm cutting out a little bit of the dead time here, where I'm just kind of loading and unloading the paint, but the actual application is quick. So we're going to move on now to our bold purple red. You'll notice I'm applying the bold purple red to areas where more light's going to be hitting, so it's a little bit more intense, kind of showing off that red armor a little bit more. One of the armor shoulder pads is going to end up actually being white, but I'm actually shading it in red here. I didn't realize that at this point. Not a big deal, we'll go back to it later, but it's good practice regardless. I'm also taking a little bit of liberty with the chainsword, just kind of shading it in a way that looks interesting, not necessarily anything realistic. This is definitely a very quote-unquote heroic model. Can't forget the little blood chalice here that this guy's holding. It's a really nice, gross kind of artifact that Blood Angels have, so I'm going to bring the red up on that quite a bit, but we're not done. So like I mentioned, we're going to use Spring Green as a highlight here for a red armor. We're going to mix a little bit of Spring Green with a little bit of Bold Pearl Red, so probably about 2 parts red to 1 part Spring Green, and this complementary effect is going to give us a nice highlight color. It's going to be kind of peachy. So another option here is you can actually just use peach. Peach tone is a nice highlight for red. Alternatively, other things that you can look at are things like yellow. That'll give you a very rich, fiery, kind of very warm red highlight. Otherwise, if you look at white, white's going to give you a very pink, kind of pastel kind of highlight. So it's just kind of whatever may fit. And in the shadows, you can use various other tones, but that might be something for another time. Here's another quick trick. If you're not quite happy with how your highlight has turned out, a nice use of transparent paint from Monument in their Pro Acryl line. I wasn't quite happy with how my highlight was coming out. It came out a little undersaturated, a little desaturated. So instead of reworking our other paints into it, I'm just throwing a little bit of that transparent red over it to resaturate it. Now we're moving on to some hand brush work. I'm going to break out some dark neutral gray, and we're going to set up some things here. I mentioned that the shoulder pad, I actually want to turn into a white shoulder pad, so I'm going to set this up with some dark neutral gray here, as well as setting up some of the wings here on all of the different emblems with some dark neutral gray as well. I'm going to use dark neutral gray and later a little bit lighter tone to bring those wingtips up. The joining material in the joints, the elbows, the knees, etc. I'm going to just use some Army Painter matte black to make those nice and matte and black. Easy, easy. I'm even hitting that chalice skull with some dark neutral gray here. We're going to set that up for some highlights. That'll be quick and easy. Going to get out one of my favorites, light neutral gray here, and start working in some of those details that we were just talking about. Alright, I am hitting the shoulder pad here, and over that dark gray, that is coming out nice and smooth. It gives us some nice recess, kind of shading there, real easy. And we'll also hit the skull on the chalice with the airbrush. The rest of it we'll do with our hand brushing. Overspray is not that big of an issue. I'm going back in here with some dark burnt red and kind of touching up the hand around the chalice, etc. We're going to want to touch that up here before we go in and hit the rest of it. Not a big deal. Don't panic. Just go back in, hit it with one of your mid-tones or your darker tones. It's usually a good way to mute down some overspray. You can use your airbrush or your traditional brush. Alright, we're going to take this to the next level. We're going to use Seraphim Sepia from Citadel. We're going to wash out the chalice. This is going to stain the entire skull and give this kind of really a dirty look right now, but don't worry, we're going to go back and touch it up a little bit. Just kind of water down this wash a little bit. If you need to kind of wick some back up with your brush, so be it. Use a little bit of water, and if you are worried about some staining, or you don't like the effect that you're getting, using a little bit of slow dry or flow improver may help your wash. So just like on the shoulder, we're going to have to hit the backpack with some grays. We're going to use our dark neutral gray and bright neutral gray again here. Just using the airbrush. We're going to use those kind of mostly top down. The dark neutral gray is going to hit most of it, so all around on the backpack, and then the bright neutral gray is going to be mostly top down and just kind of hitting a few edges and angles to make it look good. Just whatever you think looks good as far as panel modulation goes. It's a small panel, so do what you can. So the bright neutral gray is pretty strong. That's going to get you most of the way to what looks like a white backpack. So just apply that as you can. Just be a little bit careful to leave some recess shadow. Now this might be cheating a little bit. I don't know exactly what this is, except it's a white paint. And probably the closest thing you can find is Pro Acryl's Titanium White. But it's a very thin white paint that's easy to airbrush with. We're going to use this for a little bit of highlighting in the very top areas of this. To kind of bring that neutral gray up just a little bit closer to a pure white. Kind of hit some of the edges, some of the rounded areas, and bring that up just a smidge. You can apply this to the shoulder pad as well. We want to add some shade and shadow back into our red armor. One really clutch color for doing that is Nightshade Purple from Reaper. Now this is a great color because it's not black, but it's a very dark purple color, so you get some very rich saturated shadows. Nighttime is not black, but it's very shady. So now I missed out on actually recording this, but you can see where the shadows have been added in. And I can actually hit a little bit of the gray too if I really want to on this. I kind of mostly hit under the arms and underneath the armpits there, and you can see exactly where we're at with all of our airbrushing. So we're going to speed it up again. At this point, we're hitting some base coats here, mostly with the dark neutral gray, over the wings on all of the iconography here. So there's the big chest panel, There are wings on the knees that we've already covered, and there is a pair of wings on the shoulder that we have left as red. So there's a lot of detail here to work in, so we'll just keep moving. So at this point I'm getting out our bright neutral gray as well. There's a little skull on his belt buckle here, so we're going to touch that up as we go. But we're going to use mixtures of the dark neutral gray as well as the bright neutral gray to start bringing these up. So we're going to feather out the feathers, literally, so just bring it out towards the tips and brighten them out toward the tips, leaving the kind of recessed areas where the feathers connect into the wings darker. And we're going to hit the kind of like upper tips of the edges of the wing emblems, literally where they should be showing relative to the light of the Space Marine. Build these up to kind of almost bright tips, leaving some nice recesses kind of as you see fit to all of the emblems. And then eventually we'll move on to a bit of a brighter color, but basically you should start working up from all the way to from the dark gray to the bright gray. We'll hit the tassel with some grays as well. Might as well just bring it in on a similar color. Alright, so things are starting to pick up. We're going to get out a Regency Gold by Darkstar. This is a really rich gold true metallic, and this is going to be the one true metallic that we bring in is gold. And we're going to start hitting all of the different pieces that need it. So mostly it's trim here. So all of the different blood drop icons, we're going to hit the trim around those with gold for now. So we can go back and actually hit the gems. And we're also going to hit the trim around the shoulder pads and a few random bits here. Darkstar is nice and thick, pigment-wise, but applies very thinly. Just 1 to 2 coats here gets most everything, and just make sure you get all around the edges here to get a nice thick, not necessarily thick, but a nice, well-distributed application of gold. I don't know. Words. Alright, so a number of the pipes and little panels and stuff on the chainsword and the Narthecium, I think that's how you say it, I'm going to pick out with some dark neutral gray here, just reusing some of our paints to make a bit of a non-metallic steel look. Same thing with the teeth along the chainsword blade. So luckily they're pretty easily picked out, they're well defined, they're very large, so we'll just make kind of a shaded and edged distinction here. So that's what I'm using, just those two colors. They work really well together with just a little bit of black and a little bit of white to really bring them out on each end. Alright, this is where I'm at so far. Feeling pretty good about it. Taking a look at the backpack as well. We've got a nice white backpack to go with our Sanguinary Priest. So we're going to bring out some highlights here. One thing I am going to do, these kind of like tube things that look like they might be full of fluid or whatever, I'm going to go ahead and make those black so I can make them look like they're full of fluid. So that's one thing I'm going to start off with here on the backpack, just to detail this out. We'll do the same thing on some of these pipes and hoses and ribbed tubes, etc. Like along this breastplate, we'll use some of that dark neutral gray with black and bright neutral gray to kind of bring up some highlights here. So not necessarily a very realistic look, but it looks good from a tabletop level. There's some neat little vial things on his legs, so we're going to bring those out using kind of a steel tone, making them look like some sort of like steel kind of medical equipment strapped to his leg. It looks pretty good, I think. We'll go with that. One of the great things about recording is realizing that you've done something and don't know where you did it, even though you're looking for it. The gems on the icons, if you don't catch it in the video, I'm going back and using burnt red and a lot of bold purple red on them to make them look very bright. Not necessarily super gem-like, but a little bit darker towards the top, maybe even mixing in a little bit of black on the larger ones, and then using a very small smidge of white for a spot highlight towards the bottom. Now, I'm starting in on the face here, and what I am using is the Reaper Triad for tanned skin, so I'm starting off with tanned shadow here, and I'm basing in everything. I will be using a couple of other tones here before I'm done. I like doing unruly blonde hair, so I'm going to start off by hitting this guy's hair with some Averland Sunset from Citadel. And this will change a little bit before we're done, but this looks very mustardy compared to our ketchup. Alright, we've got a nice base coat. Let's get some Reaper blonde hair in there. We're going to just mix a little bit there on the top. And it's a little bit thin, so I'm going to have to hit it a little bit here and work it in there. But this is also not the final tone. This is mostly to kind of brighten up the Averland Sunset and really desaturate it a little bit. We'll mix a little bit in there as a mid-tone and kind of blend it together back and forth just a little bit here. Couple of spot details here. We're going to get his teeth. Use a little bit of our bright neutral gray here. Why not? Sure. And we'll also hit the purity seals on his belt. I kind of hit these with gray to begin with. We'll go back, hit with them with a little bit of our bold purple red, just straight out. We'll hit it with a little bit of burnt red, then bold purple red. So reusing colors here that we've had out before. Here we are, we're hitting with some of the gems here with our bold purple red. And we'll go back and get those again with a couple of spot highlights here, using some white here on both the purity seal and the gems. Just going through and hitting a few things that are randomly red. There's another little gem on the chainsword. There's some gems around the chalice as well that you'll notice I hit, and one on the Narthecium that I just hit with a little bit of that bold pearl red. Now we're actually going back in. I'm actually using the flesh tone that we got out earlier, that tan skin, to use on our purity seals here on the paper. And we'll mix a little bit of our white with the tan skin to kind of bring that up just a little bit. And then we will darken that back down with some of our dark neutral gray. So that's what we use for our purity seals here. Just kind of reusing some of the colors on the palette, because why get out some other colors? Why get out other paint? Just kind of use up what we got while it's there. Always nice.
I wonder if this is part of Yumi's strategy.
Going back to reusing some colors, using some of that Averland Sunset that we got out earlier, and hitting the light fixture thing on the backpack here. We're going to use some of our dark neutral gray and bright neutral gray, as well as titanium white, to hit some of the underlying details. We're going to use some of our bold pearl red here on these two little light fixture things, and we're also going to use some of our burnt red, bold pearl red on the little kind of like crossover infinity symbol thing on the back. So I don't know what the name of all these things are. I'm sure somebody could fill me in, but that is what it is. So you can kind of see where I'm going here. We're hitting these with a little bit of the red, and this will kind of stand out just a little bit. And then we'll use some of that titanium white for edge highlights here. So we'll skip ahead a little bit. It's that time once again. I get out the Magimix and we start hitting up a bunch of things with our Magimix. Mostly the gold here. I'm hitting the gold with our Magimix, and a few of the areas here I might want to reinforce shadow wise here on the red. Also take the Magimix very well. It's kind of a brown and a black, It's in fact Nuln Oil, Agrax Earthshade, and Lahmian Medium mixed together in equal proportions. Thank you, Genuine Vision, for that. And we're going to hit a number of things here that we've kind of gone over. It's a great way to stain things. So I like to stain my not my non-metallic, but my true metallics, especially my gold here, with it. You can do a lot of different kind of stains with true metallic gold. You can do blues, you can do purples, you can do reds, you can do browns, you can do greens, you can do a lot of different things here, but this one's quick and easy and really goes with the red, so pretty solid, pretty quick. So we'll let that dry as well. Alright, time to do some of that face detail. I'm going to get out some of the tan skin. This is the mid-tone here, and we'll also get some of the tanned highlight here. So I'm hitting mostly the tops of his cheeks, tops of his orbitals, the nose, the lips, around the mouth, kind of anything that kind of stands out and would catch light here. And we'll build that up through those two layers. Now you may have noticed I hit his hair and his face with a little bit of that Magimix. Not a whole lot, but just enough to give it a little bit more definition, so just keep that in mind. That adds a little bit of a brown tone before we start adding these facial skin tones. Hitting a few non-metallic highlights here with our bright neutral gray and our white, so just keep doing that as you see them. There's various different not tunnels, but tubes, and different like consoles and stuff here all over the place. Just keep going, keep hitting them. You'll eventually just get them all done. That is what it is. That includes the handle of the pistol here. We've already knocked that one out. There's a little skull thing on the holster. Lots of tubes around underneath the seam. There's a little like panel as well there, so just keep going. going to go back and hit some more of those edges here with a little bit more of our white and bright neutral gray. So don't be afraid to bring those up just a little bit more. Get a little bit more definition here. So white is not white. We want to kind of bring it up as close as we can. And then these white marks are really the last bit of highlighting we can do. So I'm fairly happy with how this came out. Came out as a nice, very cool kind of gray-white, and that's kind of what I was aiming for. Get to do some nice spot highlights on these little lights as well. We'll make those really stand out.
A strange day.
We'll keep highlighting some of those gray metallic tones as well all over the gear and stuff that our Sanguinary Priest is carrying all over him, especially all these like little metallic tubes.
Strange day.
So I'm kind of cheating here a little bit. I'm using tube acrylic white, specifically Schmenke brand white, and I'm going back over the tips of these wings here and getting the very tips hit with that white. Now this is the white that I've actually been using on the last little bit of what we've been working on after I used that kind of special mix here on the airbrushing section. Now this is a very nice thick, very opaque white, and it does a very good job at what it does, which is coverage. So good for specular highlights like this. Good to have something like this on hand. A lot of people also like having white ink on hand for the same kind of purposes. So there are reasons to have the same colors in different mediums. But again, we're hitting some of the specular highlights on all the little details here, and mostly those little feather tips. So I've used that dark neutral gray, bright neutral gray, and a little bit of our white here to hit the teeth on the chainsword as well. They're very well defined. They're a little bit bigger than what would be currently released on newer models, but that actually works to our advantage here.
strange day.
That tan highlight on the face work. We'll highlight out the skull with a little bit of those face tones as well. Don't be afraid to reuse those. Get his eyebrows with a little bit of the Averland Sunset and use some of that brown wash again to bring that down, and then bring it back up with the blonde hair, and then bring up the skull with the tan skin and tan highlight both here. We're just reusing our colors. Reuse them. Want to add a little bit of detail to our gold, we'll use some Renaissance gold here from Darkstar to add some highlights. So the same basic concept applies here, just highlight where the light should be shining and just bring it up a little bit. So this is just a little bit more of a desaturated gold. Bring that out on the shoulder pads mostly, and a little bit on the chalice. After I do this, I just bring up a little bit more red on the feet. I'm trying not to go too heavy on the edge highlighting, but I still want to bring out some differentiation in shadow and highlight here as well, just so things are well defined. Now after I've got all that done, I'm going to go back to the backpack here. The light itself needs a little bit of work. I go actually in here and hit it with some of our wash again. And we'll need to let that dry once that's settled in. Alright, challenge time. Never good with decals, and I don't have any. So, time for some freehand. I'm going to freehand in one of these blood drops. I'm going to start off with some Regency gold, and we'll use a little bit of matte black, burnt red to really kind of base in the blood drop on top of the Regency gold. We'll use a little bit of Renaissance gold to highlight a little bit of that near the very end, and then we'll use a lot of bold Purell red to bring up the blood drop, and a bit of titanium white to kind of highlight it out, just like on our other gems and stuff that we've brought out here. So now this is very difficult for me. I've never been very confident or very good with my freehand, but I'm trying out something new. And worst case scenario, I just kind of, paint over this with some black paint and then redo it with the grays that we kind of airbrushed in. Not a big deal. I might need to mask off some of the mini to avoid some overspray if I need to re-airbrush it, but that's not really too much more than getting out some of our silly putty and kind of applying it down. You'll notice that I kind of start by blocking in the area, and I block that in using the gold color. I'm using the gold color first because I'm using that as kind of a trim color around it. So you kind of work in layers. If you've ever worked with Photoshop or GIMP or any digital editor, I kind of think of my painting in a lot of the same way. I just kind of work in layers and what applies over what, and then keep in mind transparency. So Basically, once I get enough red built up in the middle, I apply a little dot of white for a bit of a shine to make it look a little bit three-dimensional. And that's good enough for me as far as this mini goes. Definitely looks a little bit more apothecarian based on the source material I've seen. So once I'm comfortable with it, let me get these little vials on the side of the backpack. I'm going to kind of assume that, you know, Blood Angel, etc., that might be filled with, I don't know, blood, some sort of serum. So I'm going on here, starting off with burnt red, then I'm going to use our bold pure red, and a little bit of white here near the end to actually bring this all together. I'm using black to kind of indicate that it is an empty kind of see-through vial, and I'm going to use a little bit of our dark and bright neutral gray along the top to give it a little bit of a shine, a little bit of dimension, a little bit of volume. Keeping this one simple, not going too hard in the paint. But you'll notice that I kind of bring that red out a little bit more where it's visible, where light should be showing. Give that a little bit of depth around where it's kind of wrapping around the cylinder of the vial. That little bit of white lining around the top kind of gives it a little bit of a look like it's got a meniscus from the inside. And that really brings together that inner fluid look. So it's well worth adding, whether it's white or a different kind of color. You can kind of play around with that depending on the fluid inside your vial. Here comes that dark and bright neutral gray just along the top here to give it a little bit of a shine. We'll finish up this light by adding a little bit of golden yellow to our Averland sunset, building that up a little bit in the recesses here, and then adding a little bit of our titanium white to that golden yellow as well, and just kind of adding it closer to the center here. And if you need to add a little bit of highlight to the bars, I actually add a little bit of our dark neutral gray and a smidge of our bright neutral gray to the bars crossing the light, and then I have a nice inner glow and an outer shadow. Used the last little bit of time to hit some little bits and pieces and details on the Narthecium. This has been a fairly quick paint, although this is a longer video, but overall I think this took me maybe 3 hours-ish altogether, and I spent a little bit of time on it, but not terribly much. It's been a blast hitting a lot of these older minis, especially metal minis, kind of restoring them a little bit from partial paint jobs. A friend of mine has donated this one, thank you Micmacs. for me to be able to paint on stream. And this, of course, will be going back to him. But I appreciate the chance to paint something like this. It's kind of unique and kind of historical. So once this is done, we're going to actually mount this on a 32mm base, kind of bring it up to speed with current rules. And I'm going to make a very quick and easy true metallic base, nothing crazy. We'll throw that on the base as soon as it's done here. And after dropping a pin in its foot, it has been attached to its base. Here's my new Sanguinary Priest all painted up to return back to my friend. This has been a blast to paint up some old school minis. I've been really enjoying this here on YouTube. So join me again next week. We'll have something else really fun for you next time. Until then, enjoy painting some more minis.